All right, this week's reviewer of the week is H. Rosie Mom. She says, great podcast. I love this podcast. It is easy to listen to in chunks at a time. Hashtag new mom life and relatable. I just gave birth and found this podcast a few weeks ago, so I searched and listened to relevant episodes to the stage of pregnancy I was in. Now that I'm postpartum, I loved the postpartum episode. Keep it up. Thank you so much for your awesome review. I know that we've had this urge and push and desire to like speak a little more postpartum.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. But first, you guys, we're going to tackle a topic that
we've been avoiding for a while.
We've been putting off, honestly. So we're podcasting. We do these in batches, and we were really trying to avoid doing this one today. Oh, we'll do it next time. We'll do it next time. But I feel like it needs to be talked about. A lot of you have been requesting an episode on vaccines for a while, and I hope you can appreciate the hesitancy, right? They've become such a polarizing topic, and honestly, we've built this incredible community, the My Essential Birth community and the podcast community, and we just really don't want to have division. We don't want that bad mojo and energy. And so here's the thing, though. It's a decision you're likely going to be hit with in pregnancy, and certainly within an hour or so of your baby being placed on your belly. And so just like we did with circumcision, just like we did with unmedicated versus medicated birth, we hope we can bring some balance to this topic and empower you with the tools to make the decision that's best for you and your family. And that decision will likely look a little bit different for everyone, and that's okay.
Yes,
that's okay.
We support you all along the way. And even Courtney and I, as with everything, have done different things with our children, and we're still friends. So yeah, if we can do it, you can do it too. I think the main thing that we want to teach you is how to be your own good researcher and advocate, which is kind of the same that we do with birth.
For birth too.
Nothing different here. It's all about informed consent and making your own decisions. But it can be difficult to come by accurate information with all of the blogs and friends with Facebook and right, all the places that everyone has their own opinion and agenda. And so we've certainly felt that frustration, and especially with the recent global health issues that we've seen
that we won't name right this minute.
There's a pandemic on the horizon. Anyways, and issues that we've encountered in the past. So the idea is that you'll be able to gather your own information, accurate information, and then make a decision on your own.
Right. And so we're going to teach you how to do that. And then after that, we're going to wrap up with an example of how to research in the way that we've shown you using a vaccine off of the current CDC schedule for children. Here's what you need to know. During this example, we will not be telling you whether or not you should get that vaccine or not get that vaccine for your child. That's not our place. In fact, as doulas, one of the things I have to let my clients know is that I can give you information, but as a doula, I cannot make the decision for you, even if I know. Anyway, so that's the same thing here. We're not going to make it for you. We are going to be presenting you with information on the illness itself, and then let you be the judge on whether or not you feel you want your child immunized against it through vaccination.
We're also going to be discussing and including the vaccine ingredients, and this information will be coming straight from the vaccine package inserts, and that's off the FDA and or CDC website.
And sometimes from the manufacturer website.
Right. Yeah. And along with that, we'll be discussing the realities of the adverse reactions, because we know that's where a lot of the concern comes in.
We're going to try to keep our personal feelings out of this as much as possible, and to keep the tone and discussion neutral and respectful. I don't know that we'll accomplish this, but if at the end of this episode, you can't really tell which way we each personally lean, that's a good thing. We've done a good job.
Yeah. Second only to showing you the process of how to make a decision, you should know that our final goal is that through this discussion, you're going to feel more compassion and understanding when you encounter someone who doesn't feel exactly like you do. I think that's kind of the big thing. And what we strive for, I know within the community, within the Facebook group, like have the conversation, get all the information, talk to other people about it. You don't necessarily, it's a good thing to be talking about it out loud and speaking about it. But the judgment and the shaming and that's no where it stops. Yeah, exactly.
Because when you think about it, everybody is looking through choices that they come across through the lens of their own personal life experiences and their own feelings. And so I think humility and compassion and civility are always going to be the right answer. And it's interesting because I think it's wonderful to have convictions about stuff, but particularly when it comes to vaccines, I try to approach this topic in my mind from the attitude of, this is how I feel and the decision that I've made for my children, but I could absolutely be wrong.
Right.
I see the validity to both sides, and we hope that you can come from a place of seeing and listening too, because seeing doesn't always mean that you have to agree, right? I guess my point is, don't be immediately dismissive of others and their point of view. Don't be resistant to new information. That's how we improve, right?
And I think you brought up a great point, and we definitely went over this with circumcision, right? We were like top of the list, but the truth is we're all trying to be the best mothers that we can be. That's why we care enough about the information to research it in the first place. It's why we pray and ask our friends about it. It's why it's a discussion and such a hot topic, because we truly care. We want to do what's best for our children, and that's where the respect needs to come in. So now that we've berated you enough,
I know,
be nice, people.
Be nice. Be open to new possibilities. So how to research for yourself. Where the heck do you start? Well, we can tell you where not to start.
Social media.
Social media. Just beware of social media posts, of Facebook group posts, of articles on random sites or blogs on the internet. Moms groups. You are determined.
I cannot stand moms groups. Get out of bed.
But you guys, articles on random sites or blogs or on the internet. If you come across something, are the sources that they're linking to legit, or is it somebody else's blog? I was in a discussion. It actually had nothing to do with vaccines. And this person, I don't even know who they are, stranger on a Facebook thread, put forth some really bold assumptions about something that I hold. It's a conviction that I have. And I was like, oh my gosh, is that right? And she had some links. So I clicked on one of them, and it linked to somebody's Google Drive of notes. And then when they would make some ridiculous claim, and then you would click on, and this is proven here, and you would click on the link and it would go to somebody else's blog. And I'm like, oh gosh, you guys, come on.
Blog train.
But I do want to add this caveat. Just because you do find it in a social media post doesn't automatically make it wrong. You can use that as a jumping off question, right? Like, oh, they said that this vaccine has this ingredient. That doesn't mean that it doesn't, but you then, when you're researching that to see if that's right, you need to go seek out legitimate resources. Be especially careful not to immediately reshare something unless you've actually vetted the information, right? So can I just share? I know I've been talking a lot. A bad example of this and a good example of this.
It reminds me of Animaniacs, where they're like, good idea, bad idea. Do you remember watching this?
Yes.
Okay, that dated
us.
Ignore.
I think it's coming back around though. New kids are watching Animaniacs.
Have you seen the new? Yeah, maybe we shouldn't go here. Maybe, is it DuckTales? There's it's Mickey and Minnie Mouse, and it's got, not DuckTales. Yes, but I'm like, these are
violent,
inappropriate.
No. Okay. All right. So let me give you a bad example. I had a family member in my immediate family text me a screenshot of a Facebook post. She said, somebody in our extended family sent this to me. Here's the gist of what it said. It said that we're all being microchipped, and that they're doing it through the swabs. The swabs, when you're getting COVID tested, they go up through your nose. They feels like it's touching part of your brain. They're like, that's where a microchip would need to be implanted. And so
makes sense.
There's you can't see them. They're like microscopic microchips on the tips of these swabs. And everybody who's been tested for COVID, you've now got these in you.
So if I've been tested 4 times, do I have 4 chips?
You are covered in the microchip department. Okay. So this, I read this. Now, mind you, I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat here for a second. Tinfoil hat on. Conspiracy theorist Courtney
right now.
is here. That would have been fun.
Next time.
Even I read this.
To you.
Okay. Could there be some particle of truth I just laughed. I was like, oh, I hope you're texting that as a joke to me and not because you think that's legitimately true.
Was it a joke?
I didn't ask her because I didn't want to be like, you couldn't be serious. And what are your feelings?
You just sent back LOL. We've been through this.
I know. I just need to text it back. But here's the thing. I'm not saying that there's not a patent for microchips. There is. I researched it on a legitimate source, but I don't think that's how they're going about doing it. Let me give you a good example.
Where is this going? Keep
I
going.
know. Hold on. Also on social media, there's an account that I actually really enjoy following. They're on Instagram. They're at Just the Inserts. And I enjoy this social media account because it shares information on vaccines they only go from the CDC or from the FDA. And so, but again, just because they say something or post something on there, the burden of it needs to be on you to go research that and verify the information that they're sharing. It's helpful if you know that they're getting stuff from the CDC. There can also be books written by credentialed people. So those aren't like the most official sources you should be going to, but if it's written by an MD and they have research degrees and all these kind of things, then you could listen to that. One of the books that I enjoy is called What Your Doctor May Not Tell You About Children's Vaccinations. We can link to that. I know it sounds like it's going to be biased. It's actually not. It's similar to Steph's and my approach. They share the good and the bad.
Okay, so I know there are going to be people listening who are like, yes, but I think some of the CDC and FDA information is flawed. Are we talking about this?
We're going to talk about that. I'm so glad you brought that up. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is there's a lot of bad out there on social media that's just plain cray-cray. It's just crazy. Yeah. But there are some good things on there too. The point is, wherever you're pulling it from, you need to go fact check that with a legitimate source. And I'm not talking about Snopes. So let's talk about what makes a credible source.
Let's talk about Snopes. Okay, what are legitimate, credible sources? A lot of them that we use, right, are like the PubMeds or the .gov, and that's not just for vaccines. That's for the birth stuff that we do.
Absolutely.
Anytime you're researching anything. Yep. Vaccine inserts direct from the manufacturer. It's the same when we're talking about Cytotec or these other things.
Pitocin.
That's exactly what we send to you guys. .edu, the medical journals, and even like Google has like a Google Scholar function where you can search credible information off of there. If you have friends like we do who might be midwives and can look up information in their databases, and you can also pay for those databases. Those are all places that you can go for information.
And Stephanie alluded to, okay, but who's funding that research, right? Who's funding the school that this person attended? Even when we're looking at things like, and these are less great sources, I wouldn't categorize these as the same as a .gov or whatever. But if we're looking at major news outlet stories or even .org, I feel like they're more likely to be asserting an agenda that could be there. Here's the thing. Everybody has an agenda. Even if Stephanie and I are saying that we're trying to remain neutral and just give you the facts about something, by virtue of the fact,
our agenda is helping, though.
Yes,
to help you.
But I've had people say, "Well, this is factual information," but the information that you're choosing to include or the information you're choosing to withhold will flavor what that perspective is.
That's true.
Just hold on, guys. We're getting somewhere, I promise. So let's talk about vaccines, and we're going to use legitimate sources, and let's talk about how to research this.
Okay, so the first thing that you can do, and I know that I did this as well, is you pull up the CDC vaccine schedule for your baby or for your child. You look at everything that the pediatrician sends you, and they're pretty good about either the insert or the information sheet,
especially
is what
if you
they're
request
giving you.
it.
Yes. Yeah. And you can even create your own spreadsheet with research for each vaccine listed. That's a good way to like pair them side by side and be able to look over the information all at once. And then you can turn it into a Google Drive and start a blog.
And then link to other people's blogs,
and it'll be fun.
We're kidding, guys.
But
that's a joke.
example, so birth to 15 months, there's 10 different vaccines and a total of 24 doses. There's different options for different vaccines. You can Google different options for a DTaP vaccine.
Right. So if you were to Google, DTaP vaccine, Google will respond with, there are 6 pediatric DTaP vaccines listed and currently used in the United States. There's Daptasol. Is that really the name? That sounds like jazz hands. Maybe I said that wrong. Infinrix, Kinrix, Pediarix. Anyway, it goes on to list what those 6 are. So it's not like it's just the one DTaP vaccine. No, there's actually 6 based off the manufacturer and who's making it.
And what does that mean? I mean, there's been this issue with the COVID vaccine, right? Like AstraZeneca and
Johnson & Johnson
and Pfizer and Moderna, and they all do different things a little bit, and it matters. So that's all information to look at for sure.
So here's the thing. Combo vaccines are going to be the most popular. So when you bring your little baby into the pediatrician and they say, okay, there are 2 months, this is their 2-month checkup. These are the shots that are recommended recommended today, and it's just going to be 2 sticks because we've got a combo for these and whatever. Combo vaccines are the most popular. And the pro to this is that your baby doesn't have to get stuck so many times. If there's like 5 different shots that they need, they're not having to get 5 different pokes, and that's nice.
Right. But we have heard kind of like the other side of that is when I was a kid, we didn't need 200 vaccines by the time you were 18, however many it is, we only got this many. And anyways, conversation for later, but
it is interesting to compare what a lot of us born maybe in the 80s, 90s, I guess there would be people born in the early 2000s who could be listening. Right? But it's interesting to kind of compare what you got as a kid versus what's recommended now. And it is more.
Right.
It is.
Yeah. And I think too, with a combo vaccine, just to kind of take us back there, if your child does have a reaction, it might be harder to pinpoint, which vaccine did they have a reaction to? Or was it the chemicals used for preserving that they had a reaction to? All of that, it gets a little tricky, right?
Yeah. And I think the thing that always sort of confused me is that when you've got a baby who's ready to be introduced to solid foods, do you guys remember this? If you've already had babies, your pediatrician's so good. They're like, okay, we're only going to introduce one new food at a time. And we're going to do that for about 3 days before we introduce anything new. And you need to be watching for the following for allergic reactions because we need to know what specifically it would be that they're having an allergic reaction to. And so I was always kind of confused, but wait a minute, we give these little 2-month-olds these combo vaccines. We're not separating them out. How do we know what they're having an allergy to? I don't know. That was always a little bit confusing.
Well, and some providers, you have the option that you can give one, even if it's a combo vaccine, give this one here and then wait a couple of weeks or a couple months, and then we can do the next one. So, right, that delayed, or however you choose to space it out, that is an option. But even with that, the combo ones have several in them. So,
and you can pay extra money, or you can request single vaccines, but talk to your pediatrician. Some offices allow that, some don't. I don't know what the pricing is. It's different from thing to thing. If you're wanting to be more careful, that can be an option. They can order those. It's a little more complicated.
Well, and that's something that's bothered me from the beginning. Like, what if I don't want all of DTaP, but I do want them to have tetanus? I know that tetanus exists in the emergency room as a separate thing, but they don't necessarily have it at the pediatric office. And so anyways, it's weighing those.
What if I want my kid to have polio, but not hepatitis B, but they only offer the polio with hepatitis? It's frustrating for sure.
Next, you're going to want to know more about the vaccine itself. You can ask your doctor which brand of vaccine they carry at your specific or at that specific office, and different offices may have different vaccines. And then the best place to research is always the package insert. That's going to have all the information itself. You can Google it. You can bring it up at any time now and keep track of them because they change. So I know just a couple years back, there was a change with the MMR, and it started to include some other adverse reactions that we had been hearing what people were having trouble with, but they were claiming, well, it's not on the vaccine insert, so it doesn't exist.
Right.
And that's the truth. If it's not on there, it doesn't exist. Don't get me started. That is that's not just vaccines. That is all things medical. But ingredients, it'll have the ingredients, the side effects, the most common ones, the less common ones, the rates of adverse reactions. It also has the information to contact in case you do have an adverse reaction. And if you have questions or concerns, highlight them. Print it off, talk to your doctor, write notes in the margin, keep track of everything so that you can ask all the right questions. Yeah,
because for example, when I had that question about, wait a minute, why do we talk about spacing out food, but we're not doing that with the combo vaccines? That would be a really great, maybe there's something I don't have advanced degrees in biology or chemistry or whatever. Maybe that's something I just don't understand from my limited knowledge. And so if I can ask that of someone who knows more than I do on this subject, that can be helpful. So it's okay to have questions, write them out. Another thing you're going to want to make note of is the origin of the vaccines. And the reason we say this is because we know at least a handful of you listening may have concerns about using vaccines that come from aborted fetal cell lines. That could be an issue for some of you. And so there is a website. It's cogforlife.com. This is Children of God for Life. But again, this is a .com or a .org. And so you have to be careful about the information that's presented there. we can't necessarily hold that with the same gravity as we would something coming directly from the CDC or the vaccine manufacturer themselves. Another thing that you're going to want to research is the origin of the vaccine. Many of the vaccines that we have are derived from aborted fetal cell lines, and that could be a moral issue for some of our listeners depending on their beliefs, and so that's something you'll want to check out.
Yeah. And then make sure that you research the disease itself. How prevalent is it in your actual area? United States versus other countries will definitely have different rates. And even your specific area, different states or counties or sections or whatever, definitely looking into that is important. And then the disease history. Was there a marked decline in that disease after the vaccine was introduced? And can it be attributed solely to the vaccine? We saw even with like hand washing and sanitation, and there are other things that happened around the same time. And so anyways, the point is it's good for you to take all the information in, research, and then come to a conclusion yourself. And you gave an example too.
Yeah, exactly. There were certain diseases that we started to see a lot more often, but they kind of tended to coincide with the introduction of pesticides being sprayed on our food or, water conditions. And so it's so nuanced. There's a lot more into this than just the vaccine and the disease itself.
Right. And then who does it affect? Like the age group? Are you or your baby particularly susceptible, or would you have adverse reactions if you received this or if you got this disease? Consider your child's situation. Are they at an increased risk of exposure to that disease specifically? And that can even have to do with, are they in a group setting a lot, right? Like, Are they in childcare versus being at home? Is there anything in my baby's genetic makeup or family history that would be a cause for concern regarding this disease or for the vaccine?
Yeah, either one. So for example, if you have a child who has a severe allergy to eggs, you're going to want to research the vaccine ingredient list because there are many that have remnants of that in there. If you have a history of autoimmune disorders like MS or lupus in your family or other immune response related issues, you're really going to want to do a risk-benefit analysis here because the vaccines stimulate an immune response. That's what they're designed to do. That's part of how they offer you protection. But that's not always a good thing for everybody, right? Another thing to pay attention to would be recovery outcomes for that disease. Let me give you an example. Does anybody remember the Flintstones? Meet the Flintstones, right?
Yes.
Or maybe you've heard of it. It's probably not a cartoon a lot of you saw commonly. I did as a kid, but we're older. Chicken pox and measles were so common during childhood that there's actually an episode where they've got measles. It was kind of like a childhood rite of passage. I had chicken pox as a kid. There's pictures of me. I'm 1 year old and it's Christmas time and I'm just covered head to toe.
Christmas tree.
I was a little blonde Christmas tree. Anyway, so is it something that most people recover from just fine? You want to pay attention to natural immunity, meaning you've had that disease and you've recovered from it, versus vaccine immunity. What's the follow-up? Does natural immunity win you lifelong immunity? With some things it does, with others it doesn't. Does the vaccine immunity require boosters throughout life? I can tell you young adults aren't super great about remembering to get those. And here's...
side note, right? Herd immunity. Like that's something to research too, because herd immunity in the way that they describe it, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily exist. And that's because we have young adults and like grown people who are like, I did that when I was younger and
I got my kindergarten shots and they haven't had anything since then. And so we think that we've attained this certain level, but actually if you were to check titers, which is you do that through blood work to see how much immunity you have for something, it may be lower than what we think.
Totally.
And another thing to consider, I had to do this with my boys, is if your child were to get that disease later in life, meaning not in childhood, due to missing a booster or by not getting that disease naturally, is there an increased risk? And a good example of this is chicken pox. If you get chicken pox as a young kid, you're typically going to do fine. I mean, you're going to have a fever and there's all that kind of stuff, right? But you recover and you're okay. If you get chicken pox, especially as a male, as a young adult, that can cause sterility. That can lead to a hospitalization, and those are things to consider.
Right. Or if you don't have it and you get chicken pox while you're pregnant, that can actually be terrible for baby. So yeah, all of those There's just a lot of things to
so
consider.
much to take in.
That's why we can't give you all the research here. We're teaching you how to do it. And
Yourself.
that's where, it is a rabbit hole. It's a giant rabbit hole.
Don't try not to stress so much about this. Do what you can and make the best decision you can with information you have. So once you've done all this, it's time for a risk and benefit analysis. Are the symptoms and potential outcomes of the disease better, worse, or comparable to the side effects or potential adverse reactions of the immunization?
And we think that vaccines can do good, but they are not a one size fits all, just as when we talk about things for labor and birth and pregnancy. So some would say that they're one size fits most, but at the end of the day, you need to do your research and feel comfortable with the decision that you made for yourself and your family. I think it's important, right, that you check in with your mommy gut. Trust that intuition.